And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen, standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter today on this fine Tuesday. Your host, Daniel Horowitz, back here today for your one and only one-stop shop of truly independent conservative thought, strategy, and outcomes. Folks, we got to deal with the Trojan GOP, the Trojan R, the magic Trojan R in the room that nobody wants to talk about. You're never going to change the party until you're independent of the party. And the fundamental problem with Con Inc., all my colleagues, including a lot of friends of mine, is that at the end of the day, they haven't changed their modus operandi, their entire lives, their entire careers. They'll complain tacitly about the GOP when it's convenient and when it doesn't matter and when the ball is no longer in play. But at the end of the day, they're attached to it at the hip in a sodomite-like relationship, and they're not going to do anything to change it. And they don't change the man at the top. They don't change anything in primaries. They don't have any policy vision. Rather than driving and controlling whatever the GOP leadership at a given time, now it's Trump, they get driven by it. That's all their focus is. And all the while, they don't realize the scam that is taking place. The GOP is the Trojan horse for the Democrats to promote and succeed in enacting and implementing things nationally, but even in many red states on many, many issues that they could never achieve under the D banner. They just do it under this magic Trojan R banner because somehow they know emotionally that when it comes to Republican voters and certainly the people they listen to, this influencer circle jerk on Con Inc.'s roster, they know that they have such an affinity for the Republican brand and they're so terrified of everything that has to do with D. So they only view R as the only path to defeating D, that they are willing to accept, ironically, everything the Ds would probably get clobbered for if they tried to do unilaterally, and certainly in red states they could never do, but they get our guys to accept this. I want to start off with a premise that I had speaking to a friend of mine that really brings this out. How you have pretty much everyone but people like us who are truly independent that rather than being more offended by those who wear your jersey, who wave your banner, that subvert your cause and actually successfully enact things for the other team's vision, they're less offended by it. It's bizarre. It really is. So everyone's talking about this Talarico guy. This guy running for Senate for the Democrat nominee, or now he is the Democrat nominee in Texas. So everyone's bemoaning him for being a fake Christian, and everyone's rightfully very offended that he's using biblical dogma to promote things that are antithetical to biblical values. Whereas most Democrats just openly are very secular, or they don't profess to be religious or Christians or hold biblical values or certainly cite biblical verses. So this guy's citing biblical verses to justify communism and multiculturalism and woke and, transgenderism and, everything in Leviticus that God is, disgusted by. He turns into a virtue, and everyone's very upset about that. And what this conversation I had with the friend was, we were saying to each other, wait a minute. If you go down the Rolodex of many of these issues, isn't the GOP doing the same thing? Isn't the Republican Party one big Trojan Talarico? Isn't the Republican Party itself embodying all this stuff, albeit they talk about Christian nationalism, conservative values, family values, biblical values, and the fact that maybe you could find a little bit of distance on some issues between these Republicans and people like Talarico, that's even worse because it makes it even more of a Trojan horse, even more subversive and harder to defeat. But somehow we're not offended by it. So you look at Trump, you look at so many of these Republicans like John Cornyn, and they're the rule, not the exception. The majority of them are like this. So first of all, they're personally degenerate, even as they extol Christianity. All of them are dealing with, I mean, I've always said the Republican Party is gayer than the Democrat Party. There's a lot more homosexuality going on there. And certainly when you rope in general adultery, it's like the majority of them now. But then on the issues, so most of them deep down support, including the president, unfettered marijuana, unfettered online gambling, unfettered AI transhumanism, the data center land grabs, girl boss feminism, so long as men are in female sports, endless personal degeneracy from top on down, the abortion pill, which happens to be very dangerous, unfettered IVF, homosexuality in the RNC platform, as long as it doesn't affect sports again. Transgenderism is pretty much okay for adults. Transhumanism and big tech, they're now bigger supporters of that than the Democrats. Then you have elements of the right, like Tucker promoting Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood talking points somehow, but then somehow saying he's a Christian nationalist. I mean, let me ask you, who is worse, Talarico or John Cornyn? Or put another way, Talarico or Tucker? Okay? I mean, nobody's really fooled by Talarico's riff on biblical values in Christianity in favor of woke leftism. But they are fooled and lulled into this sense of security as a Trojan horse by the Republican Party. And also, I would include in that a lot of these talk show hosts now that claim to be the based right that really is the antidote to the failed GOP, when in fact, they're just adding their subversive degenerate luggage together on top of the existing luggage rather than replacing it. So what are we left with? Again, you have all these pundits and elected officials that are posting Christ is King more than ever before. They're posting base things, whether it's conservative, right-wing, populist, nationalist, Christian nationalist, more than ever before. Talking about Jesus more than ever before after Charlie Kirk's assassination and funeral. But how many are using their platforms to demand that we reclaim ground on gay marriage, which was the antecedent to all of this? Destruction of marriage, destruction of values, the hallucination and transgenderism, thinking that two men could be a marriage. That is the problem. Yet you have the Republican Party with their man that they've been promoting for 11 years on top, blunting that Overton window and trying to make it about a consent-based transgender surgery for minors and men and female sports, when that battle has been won by a mile. But Trump believes that that's issue number 2 behind the SAVE Act, which I want to get to in a minute. It's just bizarre. It's just bizarre. It's all a dogma, a social media mannerism, a talking point. See, the difference is when you're truly independent and you don't care about a person, a party. I'm in this solely because, agree with me or disagree with me on an issue, I badly want the outcomes. I badly believe we need to do this stuff on demographics, on sovereignty, on national security, on economy, inflation, land ownership, making red states sovereign, fighting transhumanism with a wholesome pro-human approach to public policy. I believe in this to my core. I always have. So to me, it's not good enough to, have cheap talking points online. Maybe it's because I don't sell my stuff too well and I don't get too many clicks. Maybe if I did, I'd have a different take. I can't judge people, perhaps. But be it as it may, the way I am now, I'm able to see clearly. I want that stuff through. The problem we have is, see, during the Tea Party era, it was a little bit weird that on the one hand, we had a Republican Party that was run by John McCain's and Mitt Romney's, but the battle lines were clear. John McCain and Mitt Romney didn't really discuss these issues. So we were able to break these issues and these talking points into the consciousness, the water table, the fabric of the political dynamic. And we were able to start building momentum. and distinguishing jerseys. What's bizarre now is that we have more candidates and outside influencers and yappers and talk show hosts and podcasters and I was going to say writers, but we don't really have writers anymore because nobody writes and reads. We have tweeters that are espousing this stuff broadly, but then they subvert it and jujitsu it into a black hole, either ignoring it when it actually matters or sometimes being downright on the wrong side of it or supporting people who are on the wrong side of it and trashing people who are actually fighting to implement what they say and declare and assert so emphatically that they themselves support. Think about it this way. Let's say Talarico, if he would run as a Republican and he had Trump's endorsement and he was saying most of the same things about transgenderism, but with the caveat that it should be restricted for minors and female sports because it's not fair. He was taking money from the marijuana lobby, the online gambling lobby, big crypto, big tech in favor of government subsidies for IVF and the abortion pill, supported gay marriage, supported data center, rape of our land, and unrestricted government favors for the AI addiction and transhumanism, amnesty for illegals who work without a criminal record, endless spending and debt-driven inflation, throwing more money at every economic problem that makes it worse, women in combat, vaccine mandates, all the stuff I mentioned, most Republicans support, and most of that stuff, I'm pretty sure on my list, Trump supports. I'm not 100% sure about women in combat. I mean, he's not really fighting it. But what I'm trying to say is most of this stuff, I don't care if you're Catholic, Protestant, Mormon, Amish, Mennonite, Jewish. Okay, that stuff is clearly against a biblical worldview. And yet to this day, most of the people, including the man at the top, that pretty much is worth 5,000 GOP elected officials because he has the influence of more than that, they're on the wrong side of that. And what are you doing about it? I'm the only one calling that out. I'm the only one focused on primaries. I want to get to primaries in a minute. But anyway, this is where we are with the GOP now. I don't understand why it's somehow better if it's Republicans doing this than Talarico. But he's trying to say this is in the Bible. So are the Republicans. Okay? And the fact that Republicans give a little bit more of a coherent campaign riff and statement that aligns with your worldview, that makes it more dangerous because on the implementation playing field, they're doing the opposite and they're doing the same thing that Talarico wants. And again, if Talarico would take over Texas, people would throw him out in one term. Whereas John Cornyn is on his fourth term, and the only reason he's on the chopping block is because you have the most credible, albeit very flawed, candidate ever to run in a primary in my lifetime. And it's the one battle that that Con Inc. decided to get involved with, but that will end tomorrow if Trump makes the wrong endorsement. And that leads me to another thing, this misdirection of the right. So the thing about Con Inc. is, and I consider them, a lot of them are my friends. I used to work with them. The better element, these are the more cerebral, relatively, the more values-based, relatively, to the typical either sort of like Tucker degeneracy on one end or this kind of just typical John Thune GOP, Mike Johnson GOP, that sort of thing. So these are the guys that are based and conservative and all their publications and their organizations. Okay, so they have these bizarre mannerisms and obsessions that they all get involved with, and then they all circle jerk around it, and they can't see the forest from the trees. So if I had to tell you that we had one bullet to fire to expend on possibly passing something with 51 votes, pushing in a budget bill, pushing in a reconciliation bill, what would that be? Now, mind you, we had that last year, and I spoke for hours upon hours. I was the only one in conservative media, starting from the minute Trump won in November 2024. I said, look, this is a very tenuous win you have. It's not what you think it is. You're going to now own the inflation. Here are some transformational things you need to do that will make it harder for Democrats to reverse course, address inflation, address healthcare, address national security, address an immigration moratorium. And if nothing else, even if Democrats come back in, you deal with the states. You have empowered red states, both in terms of devolving certain things like immigration authority and obviously fiscal programs to the states, getting rid of judicial supremacism, and obviously making better choices in primaries. So this is the vision you guys know I laid out day after day, month after month, leading up to that budget reconciliation bill. And the president and Con Inc., they didn't even know what was in it. They didn't even focus on it much, but to the extent they focused, the baby, the bag. No, I'm sorry. The OBBB, the one big, beautiful bill. I mean, just a bunch of Teletubbies. So we squandered our capital on just a random assortment of demand-side tax provisions. That's kind of what it was. And Con Inc. was just nowhere to be seen. They were just getting drunk on, oh my gosh, we're so back. Remember that? They're not saying that so much now. But last year, when I was warning, none of this is permanent. Most of it is temporary. Most of what's temporary is being either struck down by the courts or is not even being implemented. And the few things that are will be reversed the day the Democrats come back in, which they absolutely are. What is your plan? What is your plan? And I kept saying that. What is your plan to focus on primaries? What is your plan to use the one or two must-pass bills we have to get the force multiplying change? And what is your plan to build red state fortresses? And instead, the plan was to just cheer Trump on, doing the same thing, which is ensuring that we have hellholes in red states because he's endorsing the wrong people, squandering his capital on just sophistry and frankly, things that are antithetical to what we believe in. Qatar Akbar, crypto Akbar, big tech Akbar, the data centers, trying to strong arm states, against regulating transhumanism rather than strong arming sanctuary cities. To this day, we have a DHS funding bill. You want to talk about an 80-20 issue? That's not even discussed. So anyway, none of this is discussed. Now, people could disagree. It's very hard to say what your one issue is because there's a lot of things ailing us. But, you could think of immigration moratorium to varying degrees that you feel you're able to get. Middle East immigration, refugees, diversity, visa lottery, foreign workers. If you go down the ladder of gradations, what you think is achievable, really it should be pretty much all of it. Judicial reform, or at least for immigration, updating the INA, immigration reform, so we don't have these problems. We could shunt it off to the states, allowing red states to enforce immigration law, so at least we could have oases of America that are preserved when Democrats come in. Repeal of Obamacare, healthcare's force multiplier, inflation, things like that we focused on. So we're coming in now, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the number one thing we are told is the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act. And there's a lot of psychology going on here that shows you the divide between our way of thinking as independent conservatives and the Con Inc. GOP sodomite cheerleaders that can't think out of their sophistry. And they're so in this online bubble that they think that the world is hinging on their nerdy, weird battles over weird things that are just, they can't see the forest from the trees and the trees from the forest. They just can't. So let's play Trump at the GOP House conference get-together saying the number one bill is the SAVE Act.
You can politically exist if you're not going to do voter ID and these things. I don't think the people in this country will stand for it. So I'm making my biggest plea tonight. It'll make you, and I'm not doing it for this reason at all. It'll guarantee the midterms. It'll guarantee the midterms. If you don't get it, big trouble, my opinion. If you get this, your midterms, and they know it. For two reasons. Number one, they won't be able to cheat. And number two, the people are demanding it. Every time I go out Save America, sir. Save America Act. We want the Save America Act, sir. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about housing. They don't talk about anything. That's what they talk about. And if you send it up there, you're going to win the midterms at levels that you can't even believe. And you're going to win every election for a long time until somebody really screws things up. And hopefully that won't happen.
So, folks, I don't know how you could fit in so much false information, false premises that the opposite is true in a matter of 60 seconds. But the president managed to do that. And of course, Con Inc. takes their cues from him rather than directing in. So now we're thinking, the Save Act, the Save Act. And everyone's trying to one-up each other on their exaggeration of it. And you're not going to hear this commentary anywhere else, but it needs to be said. So I'll say it. So, this one's saying, oh my gosh, if we don't do it, we'll lose the House and Senate. But then if we do it, we're going to crush the Democrats. Everything hinges on this. Now, let me start off with the policy, then we'll go to the politics. Look, as a matter of policy, I do support it, even though it is interfering with state elections. But I think, a baseline for federal elections, it does affect the national apportionment, the national, composition, that to have photo ID and proof of citizenship to vote. And I understand the simplicity of it. I understand why they feel that way. But let's divide this up between general election and primary. Let's go to both. Let's start with the general election. If you think that somehow it's going to hinge on this, you're ridiculous. I'm sorry. Okay, the inflation and everything going wrong, that somehow it's like, oh my gosh, we need this technical process at the polls. Yeah, people support it. But the notion that that's going to save them is absurd. In the general election, that is absurd. Yeah, I mean, I do believe the majority of the public would agree with it, but that's going to overpower everything else is ridiculous. And, the notion that this is the thing is absurd. Also, it's not just a matter of the election. In other words, either way, the election is cooked. The election is cooked in that Democrats are going to win every purple area, and they're going to win most very light red areas. The question is how red. That is the only question now. Now, you might say, okay, well, it's needed to give our base something. Because that might be a way of staunching some of the bleeding in the harder red areas. So that's legitimate, and I support it. But let me ask you, if you have one bullet to fire, okay, that's going to fire up the base, and this is the key, and use your last hurrah in the trifecta for something transformational. What is more transformational and firing up the base? An immigration moratorium to varying degrees, or foreign worker moratorium, sanctuary cities, comprehensive immigration reform, but the way we want to do it, giving states the power to deport, kicking the courts out of it. What's more transformational, that or proof of citizenship and photo ID? You are stupid if you wouldn't take the transformational immigration reform and moratorium. It's really that simple. Because one is going to leave us with red states preserved. The other one, it's really in the margins. And here is the big lie. This is why everyone latches onto it on the right. Because nobody wants to do the hard work of making the case for something transformational. Everyone wants to think, and this is in the psychology, I'm seeing this everywhere among Republicans. It's so easy to believe that really everyone agrees with us. Really, we're going to crush. The only reason we would lose is because of voter fraud. And if you have proof of citizenship and ID, then we win. We win because we jazz up the base, and we win because we prevent fraud. I got news for you. The reason Republicans are losing in an uninterrupted stream of special elections, really dating back to 2017, with the aberration of Trump himself winning at the top of the ticket in 2024. They didn't even do that well down ballot. Republicans have not won a substantial victory down ballot since 2010, 2014. Okay, the reason is there's two reasons for that. Number one, because of the demographics. And this speaks to the immigration stuff. If you want to prevent Democrat voters, an immigration moratorium is the bigger issue than the SAVE Act. Now, I don't mind doing both, but Trump isn't pushing the other one at all, and he's only pushing this and saying this is everything. And it's not true. It kind of reminds me of legal and illegal immigration when Republicans were trying to say we don't want illegal. So Biden was like, okay, you don't like border jumpers, the cartels? Okay, we'll get around the cartels. We'll make legal pathways. He will fly them in. And then we're like, oh, well, no, we don't want the third world migration at all. Right? So it's a similar thing here. Everyone's like illegal voting, like voter fraud. Now, it exists in the margins, but it's more the legal pathways that they made to it. Number one, importing the third world legally that votes for them. 60 million people since Hart-Celler. That's why the Democrats have such a high floor of support. They start out with like 48%, no matter how bad the economy is when they're in charge. They're in a much better shape than when Republicans are incumbents with a bad economy. And then also because part of why you have the ballots and the mail-ins and the 50 days of early voting is because Republicans went along with this, even in the states they controlled. They suck. I mean, in Indiana, we couldn't even get enough votes with a 3-1 Republican House, 4-1 Republican Senate to truncate early voting from 30 days to 15. The reason why Democrats are much better off is because of immigration and because Republicans suck. That's why. The Republican Party is the bigger voter fraud. And then, yeah, the war on God, the lack of family values, people have turned away from God, a more secular society, education. But that's a redundant manifestation of Republicans being like Talarico and not leading by example and being consistent in biblical values. So people aren't, turned on by that. They're not attracted to that. That's the bigger problem. And now with inflation and the economy, what we're losing because of voter fraud, it's so easy to say that. Is there fraud? Yes. Do I support this? Yes. But let me give you another example tied to immigration that should be in an immigration reform bill. And it's not in the SAVE Act, but it should be. Not counting illegals in the census. That actually is much more concrete because just in California alone, they get at least 5 extra seats from that. Okay? Or even counting non-citizens, but certainly illegals. But Republicans have no path to that. Trump promised it, did it, the courts balked at it, and he's like, okay, do what you want. This is another thing he failed to rectify. You see what I mean? If you're going to go on the voter issue, it's not just that culturally an immigration moratorium should be much higher priority than the SAVE Act, but even for what you're trying to accomplish in the SAVE Act, it's very in the margins. Think about it. The amount of people we brought in from the third world, not just since Hart-Celler, but even the 1990 Immigration Act, which brought in most of the Muslim immigration. Most of these people are citizens. Even if we had an immigration moratorium tomorrow, you have a torrent from the last 15 years that are in the pipeline, including a lot of illegals that Biden brought in, but were given legal pathways. They'll get green cards. They already have green cards. They'll convert to citizenship. They will vote legally. This won't help that. Now, there really is not much of an answer of how to deal with that retroactively, whatever. The best you can do is shut off immigration. But my point is, it's so easy to think that, Democrats cheat. No. Republicans cheat. They cheated us for generations and lied to us and allowed Democrats to get mass migration, early voting, mail-in, all this stuff. So now Democrats have it legally. So photo ID, this stuff's it's not gonna affect that. In a vacuum, would I rather have it? Of course. I support it. The number one priority? No. But what I'm telling you is, etched in the consciousness of Con Inc. is always to apologize for the GOP, and it's always the Democrats stole it. See, you could take an issue that's true and you could demagogue it with sophistry. So yeah, is there voter fraud that needs to be clamped down on? Yes. But to the point that that is the reason they're losing all these elections? No. They're losing these elections because Republicans suck. They have no message. They don't stand for anything. Their governance has empowered Democrat get out the vote and demographically. And then also in some of these just off-year stuff in primaries, Republicans are now too low IQ to even turn out for them. That's the issue. Oh, but this will jazz up the base. Well, yeah, it's self-fulfilling if you tee up to them the SAVE Act, but this proves my point that when Trump wants to, he could use a bully pulpit to get people excited about something. But why not do that for bigger things? And why didn't he do it in his first year when we were calling for that? And why didn't Conning call for that then? Because they don't direct Trump. They take their cues from him. Let me give you an example why immigration reform and judicial reform is a much bigger issue than the SAVE Act. A federal judge has ordered the Department of Homeland Security to justify the detention of a Nashville journalist who was arrested. Colombia-born Estefany Rodriguez Flores was arrested by immigration officials Wednesday in the company of her U.S. citizen husband. Rodriguez and her family were in a vehicle that had a Nashville Noticias logo on it, the Spanish language online news outlet where she works. And U.S. District Judge Eli Richardson ordered quick response in the case, directing the government to file a written justification. Basically saying you need to show why you're holding her. Where's your warrant? I told you the Supreme Court has dealt with this endless times. You don't need a warrant. And they talk about her being a journalist and her Fourth Amendment and her husband is a citizen. But she overstayed her visa. And yet we have to litigate one after another. We're getting nowhere. You can't do this. You can't have 20 million illegals every time the Democrats are in, and you have to literally litigate every single one after another. That is the bigger issue. And by the way, if you don't get her out, she has a pending asylum claim, she will be a citizen one day. You know that a lot of the legal immigrants, a lot of them we brought in through the front door, but a lot of them also were illegal and over the years finagled status. So if you don't fix the INA and or enforce it against the courts, either way, you're going to have to do that. This thing is moot. Now, as a side point, this guy, Judge Eli Richardson, he's a Trump appointee. Do you know he's the same guy 3 years ago who enjoined Tennessee's ban on castration of minors and was reversed by the Supreme Court? Now, look, Trump does have some good judges, but we're not batting 1,000, nowhere close to it, whereas the Democrats do bat 1,000. Again, I wrote a book on this. Talk about ahead of the curve. I wrote a book on this 11 years ago. I said the most important thing is judicial supremacism, and particularly as it relates to immigration. If you don't restore the plenary power doctrine, we're done as a nation. Like, even if you have a mandate, which we eventually did to do this, you're not going to do it. But the SAVE Act, everything hinges on that. Both civilization and policy-wise, and both politically and electorally, that premise is wrong. I support it, but that's your number one thing. That in itself shows the retarded nature of Con Inc. They can't think for themselves. They have this locker room effect online. Like, you can get them to care about anything and not care about things that aren't on there. They'll never focus on the issues that matter and the way they matter at the time they matter. Because it's all a defeat mechanism for GOP at all costs, but the Democrats. The problem is, the only reason Democrats in the long run could succeed the way they do nationally and in any respect in a red state is because of the Trojan GOP. That they themselves are part and parcel of that defeat mechanism. I'm sorry if it offends people, but that's just the way it is. So one other thing on the SAVE Act before we go on, because this is going to segue into the next segment talking about primaries, which is really, primaries really are the control group on every theory you hear in Con Inc. That really, we want everything you want, but we're just scared of the Democrats. We have to beat them. The time to do it is in the primaries. And then in the primaries, not only do they ignore the primaries, but they have anointed Trump and don't push back. We're like 1 in 100 times that push back when he has, for 5 cycles, created an entire generation of blunting the momentum we had a decade ago on primaries. So the irony is they can't even pass this one thing because John Thune is like, look, we don't support, we don't, well, 2 things. They don't want to force a talking filibuster. And frankly, a lot of those Republicans don't even support the SAVE Act to begin with. But why is John Thune there? Why is Tom Tillis there? Why is Mike Rounds there? Why is Kevin Cramer of North Dakota there? All these guys, just to mention a few. Because Trump endorsed them sometimes, some of them twice. He's been there long enough to go through a second term. That's why they're there. It's gotten so bad we don't even have candidates running to the right of people anymore because they know that Trump will automatically endorse and crush them. So we don't even have primaries anymore. So, a lot of people are talking about Tom Tillis, but I opposed Tom when he initially came as Speaker of the North Carolina House. He was a huge leftist running for Senate. I supported someone else in 2014. No one was involved. And in 2020, after years of subversion, Trump endorsed him. And that was a better year. Trump carried North Carolina that year. Republicans probably won't this year. Will probably lose the seat in the general no matter who we nominate anyway. So, that's where we are with that. So let's get to primaries. So now we have Texas. We have runoffs. So basically, most elections are until May, June. You had this first spurt in Texas, Arkansas, North Carolina in March. We have Mississippi I want to get to is tonight. And then we don't have any for a while, but we have this Texas runoff coming up soon based on the results last week. So first off, just the fact that all they care about is Ken Paxton and not Chip Roy in itself shows how dumb they are. It's not just that Chip Roy is more conservative than Ken Paxton and actually is a family man that doesn't cheat on his wife, but just the office is more important. Like, yeah, obviously I would vote for Ken Paxton over John Cornyn, but it's like one extra guy in the Senate is not going to matter when you only have 5 conservatives there at best. You're not getting anything anyway. But you know what does matter? Texas Attorney General. And with Chip running on dealing with Sharia and all that stuff, that's what you want to. But no one's talking about how you have this random guy with tens of millions of dollars trying to get Trump to endorse Chip. That's where Con Inc. should put their efforts. Instead, it's this race, which again, kind of like the SAVE Act. I agree with them with Paxton over Cornyn, but this is the bigger race. So you understand Chip Roy is an anomaly because he's fought every battle. He's been around. He has 100% name ID. And still we're struggling to get him across the finish line, even in an open seat for Attorney General. That's how bad things are. And then another thing that we're going to be watching is, do you know that a jerk is going to fill his seat? Okay. So Chip has a conservative district. Now, you would think to replace Chip, we'll get another Freedom Caucus guy. No, it's this former baseball player that's one of these celebrities, huge establishment guy, a lot of red flags with him. It was a crowded field. There were much better people in it, but Trump came in and endorsed him. And Mark Teixeira is the guy, former baseball player, wasn't even that good. And he got 60% of the vote, avoided a runoff with Trump's endorsement. So that's another example. We're actually going to go backwards from Chip's seat. And I'm telling you, primaries is all about Trump's endorsement and money. 2 things that conservatives don't get. Unless we go to conventions. See, this is the thing. This is the thing. The Republican Party is the subversive Trojan horse of the Democrats. To view it as singularly like one versus the other is missing the point. Well, Daniel, they're at least better. That's not politics is not a math. 5 is more than 3. It's an art. It's an amalgamation of factors. And this is what a lot of people miss. So there is one justification to always voting Republican no matter what over Democrats. There is one argument you can give, except only I could give that argument. My colleagues have no right to make it because they negate it. And that is that even though Republicans are the same thing at the source donor implementation level of what they're actually going to do, but at the end of the day, Democrats have the half of the country that wants that. So they have to rely on the half of the country that wants more or less what we want and lie to them. So if you get a Democrat in, we can't really pressure them unless they're in a red state, maybe. But a Republican, we could pressure and threaten and thinking they're going to lose. But that's only if you actually do it and threaten them. I don't mean physically. I'm saying that they're going to lose their seat and focus on the issues, focus on primaries, and join me in making state conventions. Could you imagine if you had state conventions? A lot of people think, oh, Daniel, well, this establishment could sometimes win a convention. You're right. They sometimes could. But here's the thing. Primaries, they win 100% of the time. Conventions, they'll only win, depending on the state, 10 to 50% of the time. But here's the deal. It's the re-election. The entire time, when we're watching what they're doing and the activists know, they're going to have to stand before that convention again. All the special interest money won't matter. It matters when you're trying to win millions of voters in Texas, not when you're trying to win 300-400 activists. But nobody's pushing that. And let me tie this into the SAVE Act, and then we'll move on to Mississippi. So, friends of mine, dear friends of mine, are convinced, as they were 4 years ago, that Greg Abbott cheated. They're like, there's no way he got 82% against Doc Chambers. Everyone I know voted for Doc Chambers. And everyone I know voted for Doc Chambers too. They didn't cheat. They think they have these algorithms. By the way, the part of our base that's convinced that they have these algorithms to just plug in the data, then the SAVE Act's not going to help anyway, if that's what you believe. But anyway, it's this cheap excuse. No, I'm sorry. Our Republican voters are lazy. Con Inc. leads them astray. The panoply of information they give them, how much of Con Inc. So Con Inc. did promote Ken Paxton. Did they promote Doc Chambers? Name me a single outlet other than me that did that. I think Lara Logan interviewed him. I mean, these small things maybe, but none of the big legacy groups, from Fox on down to I think I'm the only one at the Blaze that promoted Doc Chambers. No, I mean, they just, it's out of sight, out of mind, and they reflexively vote for the incumbent. I have watched this my entire life. I'm telling you that. There are few people that are more schooled in a continuity of observations and have been involved in primaries from the right than I have been this generation. I think I could brag about that. If there's anything in life I can, it's that. I would love to tell you that all we have to do is prevent voter fraud in primaries. And really, people are going to vote for our guy. They're not. It's not that they're against our guys. It's just that they're not on their radar and they just reflexively vote for the incumbent and the guy with the most name ID. Conventions we're seeing not like that. Conventions are different. But that's the thing. God forbid, should we actually fight to change party rules and do something different? Oh, it's stolen. So yeah, like most of Con Inc. doesn't even know about Doc Chambers, doesn't care. They're fine with Greg Abbott. But the few that aren't Con Inc. are kind of friends of mine that agree with me and voted for Doc Chambers. They're like, it's stolen. No, I'm sorry, it's not. I wish that were the case. They said, I know they felt that 4 years ago too when Huffines and Alan West ran against him. It doesn't surprise me. Now, just how broken has Trump's endorsements made our primaries. We have Mississippi coming up tonight. We have 3 congressmen, Republican congressmen. None of them are inspiring. One does have a challenger, but I don't even see him running to the right of him. Cindy Hyde-Smith, rhino of all rhinos, wasting a state like Mississippi. We could have had Chris McDaniel in 2018 when it was an open seat. They appointed Cindy, but she was only appointed. She didn't have incumbency. Chris would have won had Trump not endorsed Cindy Hyde-Smith. Now, I look and I find, oh, there's this woman, Sarah and something. I don't know how to pronounce. She married this Indian guy, some Indian-sounding name. So we have no primaries, and the only person running is like kind of to her left. She's running on this good governance, term limits, anti-corruption. There's a lot of questions where she came from. She actually does have money, maybe raised $1 million, not as much as the incumbent, but enough in Mississippi to mount a credible campaign. I know they are worried about it. It's interesting to watch. So, she moved from Illinois. She's said nice things about Kamala Harris. It's not even clear she's been a Republican. So that's all we have. So we, God forbid, should we get anyone running on data centers? No, nothing. But yet it's hilarious to watch Cindy Hyde-Smith and her supporters call Sarah Ann an imposter Republican when she herself, by the way, her whole adult life was a Democrat, Cindy Hyde-Smith. She was in the Mississippi legislature, changed parties in 2010, one of those, and then is just a complete leftist, wasting a red seat. Now, I don't care about the Senate anymore anyway. Now, honestly, I'd probably vote for Sarah Ann just because you can't get worse than Cindy Hyde-Smith. Like, at least she truly is kind of an outsider and is running on an eclectic campaign that's kind of different. I don't have much hope in that. But the point is, what I'm saying is Con Inc. would look at Sarah Ann and say, oh my gosh, that's an imposter. It could very well be she is. And what the hell do you think Cindy Hyde-Smith is? Cindy Hyde-Smith is an imposter bought out by every industry. I'd rather take a fake kind of good governance rhino that's not bought out by special interests than one that is. But the fact that Cindy Hyde-Smith just says Trump and MAGA every 3 seconds, that sort of makes everyone happy. By the way, plus, ironically, like, I know that sounds weird. Republicans, I could picture, might have a hard time even carrying Mississippi, even in a general election with people like this. Do you know Republicans last November, they lost 2 state Senate seats and 1 House seat? Do you think that was due to a lack of the SAVE Act? They have photo ID there. Okay? And you don't have that many immigrants there of all states. You have a lot of blacks, and then you have white, Republicans. Republicans are actually, I think previous year, 2 Republicans lost seats, and that's why they don't have a supermajority in one of the chambers. I think it's in the Senate. They don't even have a supermajority anymore. Is that because of voter fraud? The biggest voter fraud is the GOP. Okay? This is the sort of podcast you will not hear anywhere else, but it is the unvarnished truth. If you actually want to get to the source of the problem and solve the issues we all claim to care about, this is what you need to focus on. But this is the thing. Trump has endorsed all these clowns. Let me give you another example. You have this, the international media is claiming that the U.S. military killed a bunch of schoolgirls and bombed a school in Iran, when it's clear that their missile blew up an IRGC command center 100 meters away. So the fact that the school was blown up was either it was collateral damage from something that was a legitimate target. The fact that they put their things next to schools. This is the old Gaza Hamas bullcrap that Tucker's trying to get some people to buy into. Again, you could agree or disagree with the ROI, whether it was worth it to launch these airstrikes. That's a different story. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. We're going to do a deep dive into kind of sorting this out tomorrow with a special guest. But, once we go to war, this notion that, because the Muslim countries put all their stuff in civilian areas, so we can't bomb it because that's stupid. Either that or the IRGC blew it up. Now, we don't know. I frankly don't care. Either you support the war or you don't. But we need to move away from this namby-pamby stuff. But anyway, Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota. The administration ought to get to the bottom of it for sure and admit if we're at fault. Senator John Kennedy, mistakes were made. It's a horrible mistake. We don't even know that to be true. Why are you saying that? Kennedy was another soundbite machine that Con Inc. Oh, they played him his sound bites. Another piece of garbage. I never liked him. Big special interest guy. Kevin Cramer also, by the way, opposes the SAVE Act. Trump endorsed every one of these people. Every one of them. Look, what do you want from me? Should I lie to you? It's circular. Con Inc. needs to look in the mirror. If you're upset about the Republican Party, you were absent the entire last year, dancing in the end zone, getting drunk on your marijuana that you now support, thinking that, oh, we're winning when I warned you were winning nothing. And now they're waking up to that, but then focusing on the wrong issue in the wrong way at the wrong time, continues to ignore primaries even to this very day, except for something that gets on their radar. And then rather than directing Trump, they're directed by him. Like, they're not bothered by Elizabeth Warren's housing bill that will not only fuel the housing bubble by expanding these HUD affordable housing programs and supply when we don't need it, it will actually put in more overdevelopment and Section 8 and third worlders in your suburban red state neighborhoods, by the way. But I guess we're all for that now. See, it's not even that my colleagues disagree with me. They don't even know about this stuff. What I find when I speak to normie Republican voters, I see the problem right away, and I don't know what to do about it. They find out, either people who know me or they don't, and they ask me whether it's at services, after services, or whatever, we're walking in the neighborhood. Oh, what do you do? And then some of them recognize me, some of them don't, and they're all interested. Now, to a person, everyone I know is not a Democrat. Okay, they're not a Democrat. They share our values broadly. I'll see automatically what's at the tip of their tongue, what they want to talk to me about, and it's hilarious. I'll throw them for a loop. I'll give them a curveball. I'll discuss some of this stuff, and they act confused. And then sometimes the light bulb goes off in their mind. They don't even know about what I'm talking about. What's at the tip of their tongue is the sort of Fox News, Con Inc., conservative Twitter stuff. That's all. They don't know about anything else. We have a fake influencer class that is leading our voters astray. You could get them to care about whatever you want to care about. Trump and Trump apologists and Trump supporters, they could have used that bully pulpit for 11 years to solve all this stuff. And they have chosen to not only not solve it, but have Trump endorse and them to ignore these primaries in every single red state for 5 consecutive election cycles. Well, that takes a toll. You now have an entire generation of subversive Republicans that we were in the process of getting rid of. And now they're even worse because now they speak our language. They learned how to speak the language. Oh, whatever you want, they support. Except in actuality, they support the opposite. And you know what's hilarious? We'll end with this. Meanwhile, the reality is that as this is going on, Democrats are actually going to win. They're going to win no matter what. Let me just show you how bad this is. I'm just pulling this up here. I want to get the numbers right. Iowa. Okay, so will Republicans win the House or Senate? I love that. The Republicans will already lose the House no matter what. They'll lose the House if they pass what I want to pass. That's just baked into the cake for a myriad of reasons. You know, just an average, even a better economy and an average, incumbent midterm loss. Republicans are getting crushed on redistricting now. They have an exponential amount of retirements. Darrell Issa in California, that's a seat they're not going to hold. He just announced his retirement. And then you have the economy. But they're going to lose. That doesn't matter. And then, frankly, whether Democrats get 49, 50, or 51 in the Senate really doesn't matter much. Maybe for judicial nominees, but beyond that, it doesn't really matter. And even with the judicial nominees, as we're seeing, the courts are a one-way street for the Democrats anyway. But the real scrimmage line is whether Democrats will win things like the Iowa governorship. That's the question. Democrat candidate Rob Sands, okay? Or Rob Sand. He's the state auditor or treasurer, I'm forgetting which one. And he's a former veteran, served in the military. And by the way, Democrats have gotten a lot of candidates like this. Republicans are all thinking everything's at the top. Well, who do they have? First of all, that doesn't matter because Democrats focus on every race. And even at the top, ultimately, if the economy is terrible and Trump is being senile in his final 2 years, Democrats will win with anything. But the point is, Democrats have a lot of very talented candidates. Well, I shouldn't say that, actually, because you don't have to be that talented. Republicans suck. But what I'm saying is they have candidates that talk the talk, sound populist, sound like they're for Pax Americana, land use. Rob Sand is running against data centers, carbon capture, as the Iowa Republicans support it. So the establishment candidate, Randy Feenstra, do you know how many signatures he got to get on the ballot? 7,500. And that's enough. I forgot how much, but it's enough. Rob Sand got 24,756, 3 times as many, but he beat the record of any Republican ever in a state Trump carried by 13.5 points. Democrats now in this cycle hold the record for the most signatures ever gathered to get on the ballot there in Iowa. You know, for example, like Kim Reynolds 4 years ago, which was the GOP midterm against Biden, she got 16,000. Crushed by that. Is that voter fraud? Would the SAVE Act prevent that? No. The biggest voter fraud imaginable is the GOP and this fake-based Con Inc. that claims to be upset about the fake GOP, but in fact, they enable it every second and foreclose every ability to change it. Like, you have no right to say, you can't start a new party if you don't do all the things that would possibly fix or change the GOP. It's all a racket. It's all a racket because if you actually believed in what you espouse, you would have to come to these conclusions at some point in your career. You would have to come to these conclusions. You know, I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm like, okay, new party, state freedom caucuses, conventions, still as hard as it is to even win against the money, but at least try with primaries. None of it. They don't want to do any of it. It's at the top, 2 or 3 talking points about random bills that don't really speak to the issues. And then they get everyone hyped up about that. Folks, the current right in America is the greatest controlled opposition of all time. And until tomorrow, God bless you all. And that's just the way it is.